to tell you a few bits about the French economy, and I was given numbers that I shall comment, and that maybe you will complement with questions. Point number one, France is doing pretty well, and is certainly directionally doing jolly well. In 2006, we will have a growth of slightly over 2%, which indeed is not the outstanding performance that we would really aim at, which is clearly one that we will be aiming at, more in the range of the 3 to 3.5 to 4%. I'll come to that at the end of my remarks. But it is certainly better than the average European growth at the moment. And it has been demonstrated by outstanding performance in various areas, which I will just run through very quickly. We had a plan in 5 years, from 2002 to the end of 2006, to actually have 1 million new enterprises, and that goal has been reached. So over 1 million new businesses were created in that matter of 5 years. In my little portfolio, which has to do with exports, because I'm not the purchasing department of France. I wish I was, because I would then recommend that more be purchased in France rather than outside, coming from elsewhere. But in my little department of the exports, we're doing pretty well with a growth which will be in excess of 9% in 2006, which will be in line with the increase of global trade, and probably a little bit in excess of that, which is not bad, with a clear focus and major increases in directions such as China, Russia, India, and Latin America. So I'm personally quite pleased with the huge efforts that enterprises of France have done to somehow refocus their export policy in those directions. Indeed, the foreign exchange deficit shall be significant this year, and in a few weeks we will hear all about it, with the best characterizations such as enormous, abyssal, and the rest of it. But frankly, looking at the exports, I'm quite satisfied with the little that we have done in that compartment. Another number that is clearly relevant to Philippe Favre, who has, as you know, been appointed as the president of the Foreign Investment Agency in France, AFI, is the amount of foreign direct investment that has flown to France in 2006. We will be publishing the final results in February at shortly after the Conseil de l'Attractivité, which will take place on Monday. Monsieur Le Marolle, thank you for being with us today. Mr. Le Marolle is the very, very talented gentleman who assists the Prime Minister in relation to attractiveness of France and quite a few other matters. But clearly, the amount of foreign direct investment will be at least 30% in excess of what we have had in 2005. And we don't have yet the exact number, but 2005 was 52 billion euros, with the creation of 33,000 new jobs. If you calculate an increase of 30% on the top of that, then that's clearly quite a good number. And the CNIST numbers, which were published 2 weeks ago, are mentioning that France ranks third country in the world, right after the United States and the UK, to receive foreign direct investment. More importantly, and I'm here speaking about, I might be a little bit out of my depth here, although I've heard the rhetoric and I know the actual practicalities of it. The public finances of France have been improved in 2006, and we are on a trend of continuing to improve the finances of France. Those that followed carefully those issues will remember there was a Michel Pepot, former head of BNP Paribas, Michel Pepot report that focused on the indebtedness of France and proposed means to remedy it. And clearly that report, if only because it created awareness and brought the topic on the top of the agenda of France, as really focused and pointed the finger at significant indebtedness, which really needs to be remedied. The commitment now is to lower the debt of France to less than 60% of GDP and to balance the books of France by 2010. Deo volente, if I might use a bit of Latin, and not only Deo volente, but maybe a few right-minded electors around France, because that is clearly a program that the current majority will adhere to. Incidentally, there are other countries that are significantly indebted as well, and I could only think of Japan, for instance, as one which is more even heavily indebted than France. So it's not something that we are lonely and alone to bear. Other subject of satisfaction as far as public finances are concerned, France, of all the large countries, will be the first one to be taken out by the European Council from the sort of, we point the finger at you procedure within Europe, with having an excess deficit, which was clearly above the 3% line under the Maastricht criteria. So France is now way below the 3%, and the procedure that has been initiated by the European Council will be removed and will formally next week abrogate and remove that procedure. So the shame cloud that was over France for not having respected the 3% deficit cap is now going to be removed. Just a couple of points that I would like to raise concerning the tax policies and the tax measures and hopefully improvements that have been brought to bear in the last year. I'll mention 2 or 3 of them, not to bore you too long. First of all, as of January 1st, 2006, a new capital gain principle has been applied, under which capital gains on the sale of equities are tax exempt starting from the 6th year of ownership onwards, with phasing out over the year 6th and 7th, so that after year 8th it's a zero tax applying to zero capital gains tax applying to the capital gain generated on the sale of equity. The second important reform that has been also put in place as of January 1st is a wealth tax exemption that applies to 75% of the value of the company's shares that are held by current or former employees of the company. And staying on that wealth tax for a while for a second, as of January 1st, 2007, the tax shield which has been voted in 2006 applies, under which no French tax resident can be expected to pay over 60% of his or her income, all taxes included. And that tax shield, which is quite innovative, was really intended to protect those people that have actually generated quite a large estate and yet have not a huge flow of income. As you probably know, that 60% tax shield has been proposed to be lowered to 50% by Mr. Sarkozy in his program for the presidential campaign. I have no idea what the other candidates will do. I don't really want to dwell on that. The proposal that we have going forward, which I'm sure those of you that are engaged in the business and know that we only operate by setting agendas, measuring them, and then compensating the performance. The agenda that clearly we have in mind at the moment is to increase the growth, not to 2.5%, but more likely to between 3 and 4% for the year 2007, and setting that as our goal. Clearly, the other goal in terms of where we want to fit and against whom we want to measure is to be in the top 5 of the world economies and to keep that ranking. As you know, there is a bit of excitement and emotion as to where China ranks at the moment. Has it overcome Germany yet? Or is it in very close parity with the UK and France? And are we all disputing the same ranking? I think it's all a matter of how you calculate and how you measure. And clearly some of the measurements, particularly with the measurements of the Chinese economy, are sometimes revised and sometimes subject to a bit of reviewing and investigations. We nonetheless believe, particularly after having seen the reports and recommendations that was commissioned to Maurice Lévy and Mr. Royal, that it's something that we can actually do. And I'd be very interested to hear your views and your own speculations about your own strategy to determine towards which kind of economy we're moving. And here I'm going to just be a little bit away from the text that I was given, because I have my own views and I'd love to share that with you, and as just a contribution to the debate that we can have. Because as much as sorry, this is obsession again. As much as the Davos agenda was about this shifting equation and where we are going to and what is the goal and what the future has to offer. My personal conviction is that we are moving towards something that I would characterize as the fusion economy. And I hope you're enjoying some of that fusion food, because as I will explain to you, it's a fusion of Japanese talent, French ingredients, French pastry, and the like. The reason I'm saying that I very much see something that I characterize as fusion economy has to do with reaffirming some values and actually mingling them, merging them with other values that are pretty well accepted and dominant in certain sectors. And I would mention as those elements that are merged or that are converging or that form that fusion economy, work and pleasure. We've heard many times in France lately discussions about reaffirming the value of work, reaffirming the value of efforts. And that's indeed an absolute necessity, that work be at the center of the equation of both enterprises and the economy and the country in general. And frankly, the 35 hours a week proposal that has been turned into a law and turned the country up on its head was not helping, did not help, and has done quite a bit of damage. Which is why the previous government under Mr. Lagarde and the current government under Mr. de Villepin has tried to improve the situation so that the 35 hours constraints be at least alleviated, if not removed, because of the psyche that has surrounded the 35 hours. But to reaffirm the value of work is one thing. Equally, for those of you who have children, teenagers, and the likes, pleasure has been so much at the center of their life that we need, in my view, to think of a way to merge, fusion, converge both work and pleasure so that we can reaffirm positively work as being actually an element of pleasure. Second example of this fusion that I sort of see in my troubled mind is that of technology and brand. And the fact that clearly we cannot use one without the other, and that there has to be a common ground and a middle way where the two substantive value out of technology and out of branding can actually produce tremendous results, particularly for developed societies and developed enterprises that can not only base their success and their competitive edge on manpower and just the accumulation of capital. Third element where I see this fusion is that of private and public. And we all talk about those PPP, but clearly when the public impetus and authority and a bit of funding can actually be mixed with the efficiency of the private sector and the initiative and the process that applies to private sector, it can actually produce tremendous results. Two more elements where I see some elements of fusion as well is that of partner and customer. It's no longer just client first or customer first. It's really how do you turn your client into a partner? And that fusion between the two is also quite critical. And final one, isn't there somehow, somewhere in various businesses, a fusion between your competitor and those that collaborate with you? In other words, aren't competition and collaboration sometimes at the heart of this fusion? So I close my little parenthesis, which is really from sort of deep down what I see, what I perceive, and moving on to where the efforts of France can actually help towards that new vision, new fusion of the intangible economy or knowledge economy, which I think is a bit superseded in my view, is where we're trying to improve our efforts in higher education, lifelong training, research and development, all such measures that have been advocated by the Lévy-Journet report, and where France clearly needs to put its efforts. This has been partly implemented as well. For those of you who are not in the know, France has actually spent quite a bit of money in 2006 and will continue to spend money in 2007 on research and development by funding the Agence Nationale pour la Recherche and the Agence pour l'Innovation Industrielle, the first one being dedicated to fundamental research, the second one to research applied to those major projects that will take after the TGV, Airbus and all those major projects at which France has not done such a bad job. And finally, and I think that this is one that is of interest to many other countries, given the level of curiosity that arises in the world and that I'm very often asked questions about, is the cluster policy that we have put in place, the pôle de compétitivité, of which we have 66, which are slightly different from other clusters in other places, but which are forging links with clusters in Japan, clusters in Germany, clusters in the US, and which are scattered around France with a significant support by way of tax and social charges exemptions as far as the French state contribution is concerned, and which brings together people from the academy, people from enterprises, and people from the research and development centers in order to fuel the idea that turns into a project, that turns into a product, that goes to the market. So it's the full cycle that we're trying to encompass by actually helping the clusters around France. And those clusters are quite interesting because they range from high-tech to nanotechnologies, to pharmaceutical products, to logistics, but also, and I will finish with that because it's far more interesting to have real food than just food for thought, but we have several competitivity clusters that are actually focused on food and how you can use very basic products and typical visibility and brand of France, which is often associated with good food and good wine, into high technology content, excellent agro food business, and excellent nurture for our stomach and our appetite in general. With that, I will close my remarks. Thank you very, very much, all of you, particularly Deloitte, for having hosted this lunch together with Lafi. And I wish you the very best in the year to come. Look forward to seeing you next year, indeed, in whichever capacity, but preferably as part of whatever team will be formed under good leadership to take France further with less tax, better work and pleasure associated, and certainly a ranking that we all are proud of. Thank you very much.